Seems like the world has gone mad. Wars, terror, evil, and the largest countries that declare democratic and human values until recently goes hand in hand with it. What is the influence of China this time, and is Russia a puppet in the hands of Beijing? Today on our show we talk about the new development of the war in Israel, the progress of the war in Ukraine, and how the world should fight terrorists. Meet Henry Keane.
The war has gone mad, or it always was mad. Israel met the war on the Holy Land, or the war met Israel on the Holy Land. What's going on in the world today? Russia has started the largest war in Europe since World War II. China has become more bellicose toward Taiwan. India has embraced a virulent nationalism. Israel has formed the most extreme government in its history. And on Saturday morning, Hamas brazenly attacked Israel, launching thousands of missiles and publicly kidnapping and killing civilians. All these developments are signs that the world may have fallen into a new period of disarray. Countries and political groups like Hamas are willing to take big risks rather than fearing the consequences would be too dire. I just quoted you an excerpt from the New York Times that I read while preparing for this episode of Talk for More. Today we talk in more detail about the war escalation in the Middle East. On the 8th of June, the Minister Cabinet of Israel announced war for the first time since 1973. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the war would be long and heavy. Never heard of any easy, light-hearted wars, but let's hear the minister out.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins.
Israeli soldiers continue to find the bodies of victims of Hamas militants' attacks. In Zokreima, in the Gaza sector, the bodies of about 40 children were discovered and some were headless. Hamas, an organization, then publicly advocates for the destruction of Israel as a state and Jewish people as a nation, said that the attack would be in line with the intensification of Israeli attacks on Palestinians in West Shore in Jerusalem and also in Israeli prisons. As usual, pathos and religious fanaticism complement each other perfectly. I quote Hamas military commander Mohammed Deif. This is the day of the greatest battle to end the remaining occupation on earth, he says Hamas, highlighting the start of the operation and urging Palestinians to fight on earth. As per Mohammed Deif, Palestinians would probably have to move to other planets to discover and find some occupation there, which sounds like a very good plan to me. Anyway, this way or the other, Israeli Major Nir Dinar, a riverman of the Israeli Defense Forces, was way shorter in his speech the day of the brutal attack. This is our 11th spring, he said. On October 9th, Israeli troops managed to regain control over all the places on the border within the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces launched a counteroffensive. Netanyahu publicized the video of the strikes in social media. The caption was, "We have started. Israel can overcome it." Already on the 10th, the Israeli Defense Forces announced that they had completely restored control over the border from the Gaza Strip and encouraged its residents to go to Egypt. The artificial intelligence named one of the most fortified borders in the world. Please.
One of the most heavily fortified international borders in the world is the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, between North Korea and South Korea. The DMZ is a 4-kilometer wide strip of land that separates the two Korean nations. While the DMZ itself is demilitarized, the border area beyond it is heavily militarized, with extensive fortifications and a significant military presence on both sides, making it one of the most fortified borders globally. This zone is known for its intense security and is a symbol of the tensions between North and South Korea.
Watch this.
The US President Joe Biden immediately ordered additional military support to Israel. Biden called the attack on Israel an unmitigated act of terrorism and stated that the bloodshed of Hamas will foreshadow ISIS' darkest hours and inflict painful memories on anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people.
Hid their fear for hours and hours, desperately trying to keep their children quiet. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Like every nation in the world, Israel has the right to respond, indeed has a duty to respond. This is what they mean by a human tragedy, an atrocity on an appalling scale. We're going to continue to stand united.
The leaders of the USA, France, Germany, Italy and Great Britain, in a statement published on the White House website, vowed to support Israel in any way needed and clearly condemned Hamas and announced the following.
All of us recognize the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people and support equal measures of justice and freedom for Israelis and Palestinians alike. But make no mistake, Hamas doesn't represent those aspirations, and it offers nothing for the Palestinian people other than more terror and bloodshed.
Ukraine supported Israel just as well. The president of the country, Volodymyr Zelensky, emphasized that terrorism and terrorists must not be left impure. Islamic, or shall I state the fact and say Islamist countries, of course, made their completely different statements. Turkey offered to renounce the use of force and create two states. Wow. I wonder why did not Israel and Palestine haven't thought about it before? Of course, two different states on one piece of land. Thanks a bunch, Mr. Erdogan. You are a geopolitical genius, no doubt. The question remains though, why for your God's sake you did not renounce thousands of hidden missiles in Palestinian underground tunnels before they were fired at Israel? But that answer can wait, right? The main thing is the world would notice that you are all about peace talks. Not a real peace, of course, just talks. And then another Islamistic terror happens, and then another talks are called for, and again, and again, and again. While Israelis die, the world talks about it, and so President Erdogan called on both sides this time to, I quote, to avoid steps that would intensify the conflict, and added that the Israel-Palestinian conflict is the basis of all problems in the Middle East. Also, Iran has declared its support for terrorists. Of course, a proper celebration was thrown on Tehran in honor of the attack on Israel. We will talk about whether Iran helped the attack on Israel to happen a bit later. Qatar and Syria came out in support of Palestinian terrorism. No doubt the Taliban movement, which I will remind at one time seized power in Afghanistan, is willing to join the conflict on the side of terror, of course, on the side of Hamas. Official Kremlin and Russian Tsar calls for restraint in the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, unofficial Russia today uses the agenda and the opportunity for anti-Western propaganda. Can't blame them, that is a Russian way, which we will also discuss a bit later on in general, and in particular, how the Kremlin can and obviously will take advantage of an attack on Israel. Let us discuss that and talk for more, of course, with our next guest. Peter Stano is with us tonight, spokesperson of the EU on foreign policy issues. Peter, hello.
Hello, good afternoon from Brussels.
Good afternoon. Could the Hamas attack on Israel change the world? That's straightforward question to you.
Well, we hope not, but we are already seeing that a lot is changing on the ground. What changed absolutely is the unprecedented nature of the confrontation between Israel and Palestinians. This time it was unprecedented, brutal terrorist attack against mostly Israeli civilians. So this is a game changer, and we see the game changer also in the extent of the Israeli response to this.
What lesson to learn for the world? What lesson should the world learn out of that?
Well, unsolved conflicts only feed the cycle of violence. So this is what we are saying. I mean, after this latest escalation and confrontation will be over, because at one point it needs to be over. It will not be over unless there is a solution to the overall problem. And the overall problem is the situation of the Palestinians in general and the unsolved issue of the occupation.
What do we do as a world community, what we call ourselves civilized West? How are we to prevent this in the future? What do we do? Build fence, educate Palestine? What do we do?
Well, first of all, the solution needs to be found by those who are party to this conflict. Of course, it cannot be Hamas because there is no place for people like Hamas. These are terrorists. So with them, any solution is not thinkable. Any negotiations are not possible. But the Israelis and Palestinians in general, they were engaged in the past in peace talks. And the only way out of this vicious and eternal cycle of violence are talks and dialogue.
A terrorist group from one of the world's poorest places and enclaves pulls all of a sudden such a devastating attack. Do you think someone is standing behind the curtain?
Well, this is something that needs to be clarified first of all by the Israelis to shed some light on what happened, how it happened, how come Israel was not able to prevent it. But obviously, the Gaza Strip is a very isolated piece of land. It's a very, very controlled piece of land in terms of like there are satellites, there are drones, there is, I mean, a lot of surveillance around it. So it's obvious that with all the limitations for imports into Gaza and the limitations on basically everything, it's impossible that Hamas was the only one who was preparing and executing this operation.
Well, then my other question, if this is so, the area is so controlled, the Israeli civilians, by the Israeli civilians, how it is possible that they've lost the contact of somebody delivering thousands and thousands of missiles in there. Somebody did turn a blind eye or something inside of the Tzahal, inside of the Israeli Defense Forces, inside of the Special Security Forces.
These are all the questions that the Israelis need to answer themselves, for themselves actually, because in the end what is at stake is the safety and security of the state of Israel and its citizens. What is important for us is that we don't have to deal with the very damaging consequences in the sense of like all the hostages that have been taken, they need to be released. The aggression which still continues from the side of Hamas, meaning firing rockets, they still continue, that needs to stop. And of course, we also don't want to see the suffering of the innocent civilian population in Gaza. So this is what the attention of the international community should be focused on right now.
I want to discuss something from Reuters. Hamas has given Israel the impression that it is not ready to fight. A source close to Hamas told Reuters, describing the plans for the most dramatic attack since the Yom Kippur War like 50 years ago. It is not my intention to question the activities and competence of Israeli intelligence. But could this attack have been prevented again? And should it be prevented? Or that was the plan?
Well, these are very good questions and, very relevant questions. But again, these are the questions the Israelis need to address themselves because in the end, they were the target, they are the victim, and they need to make sure that nothing similar will be happening in the future because it was a terrible tragedy for all those involved. It was a terrible tragedy how these people have been massacred in Israel. And for us as international community, it's really important to make sure that we contribute to the relaunch of the peace talks.
Do you believe, as a person, that the reason for Hamas to attack was just maybe a lot simpler, not to change the order of things in the Middle East, but to take as much hostages as possible?
Without speculating on the motives, because it's only Hamas who know the motives. But for us, it's important that we don't see these tragedies being repeated. On one hand, the terrorists, they need to pay for what they did. No doubt. There cannot be impunity. There needs to be accountability. And again, what is important is not to create the situations where such attacks are happening. What Hamas did and what Hamas keeps doing since Saturday is actually harming the cause of the Palestinian people. It's harming the Palestinian people physically. So this is not the way out, and this is not the answer. For us, it was always about the solutions that need to be found, first of all, by the main actors, Israelis and Palestinians, and in dialogue, not in confrontation.
What if
Israel, as the European Union,
Pardon me, but what Israel is most likely to find the solution by destroying Hamas to the ground, turning Gaza into the, if not ground zero, then almost that. And that would be the solution for the just peace for another, 10 or 15 years. And then something like that again happens. Because this is, if you look back over the shoulder, this is what is happening all of the time.
Well, when we are talking about the renewal of peace talks and peace negotiations, we are not talking about Hamas. Hamas is not partner for peace.
Okay.
We cannot identify Hamas with the Palestinian people and vice versa. There is Hamas, the terrorist organization, and there are Palestinian people and Palestinian Authority.
Right.
These are the partners for peace and for negotiations.
What do you think benefit can be for Russia to get from this escalation?
Well, Russia is benefiting already because the attention of the world is shifting away. First of all, the attention of the media. But of course, the crisis between Israel and Hamas, the crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh, this will not distract us, the Europeans, from the crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine. So we keep watching what is going on also in Ukraine. And we keep continuing Ukraine. This is without question. For us, this is a top priority, because it is also in our vital interest. What's going on in Ukraine is in our immediate neighborhood,
right,
and has grave impact worldwide. What is happening in Gaza and between Hamas and Israel is tragic, but so far it's limited to the region. So, of course, the Ukrainian issue is much more important and much more serious when seen from the global perspective.
Oh, I can clearly see why. What do you think? Do you, as a politician and as a professional and as a person, do you believe that Russian-Israeli relations can be, what can they be after Israel will inevitably defeat Hamas? Will they even talk to the Kremlin? Because he was obviously supporting Hamas and openly supporting Hamas.
This is not for us to say. For us, as the European Union, it is important to ensure that Israel is exercising its right to self-defense, okay, that the rights of the Palestinian people are respected, that eventually we get to the two-state solution, and how our partners arrange their relations with third parties, okay, it's fully up to them.
Do you believe a peace talks are possible between two worlds, Arab and Jewish world?
Absolutely. That's the only way out. There is no alternative. And at one point, this will need to happen. Otherwise, we will only see the repetition of these confrontations and of this violence.
Okay. It was Peter Stano with us. Thank you so very much, Peter, for what you just told us and for your time and for your explanations. I hope when your voice is back to you, we can continue then.
Watch this.
What are the reasons for that conflict even to rise? Let's go back to the very ground of the conflict, to its reasons. The New York Times writes that Israeli forces and citizens left Gaza in 2005, but Israel's occupation of the West Bank continued. Gaza remains almost completely cut off from the rest of Palestine by Israel and Egypt, which controls the borders and coastline. There is a possibility that Hamas, which is actually a political party and a military group in control of all Gaza Strip, has been provoked by the recent and quite obvious Israel's rapprochement with the Arab world, especially with Saudi Arabia, that feared fearless Hamas leaders and forced them to resort to violent actions, no matter how dire the consequences could be for them. According to many experts, the Israeli-Saudi agreement can do nothing less but isolate Iran, and Iran patronizes Hamas, and that all leads to inevitable infusion of big Saudi money into the Palestinian autonomy, a way more moderate group than Hamas is. However, if Israel highly likely turns the Gaza Strip into ruins, it will also be highly unlikely for Saudi Arabia to go for agreement. In addition, Riyadh is talking over an agreement with Washington, under which the United States would help Saudi Arabia develop civilian nuclear power plants in exchange for the Arab country recognizing Israel as a state and moving towards normalization of relations. Saudi Arabia has not recognized Israel's sovereignty since 1948, the year it was founded actually, and until recently did not even consider rapprochement with official Jerusalem until in turn agreed to the creation of a Palestinian state. So, can Russia take advantage of the Hamas attack on Israel? And most importantly, how? The Political writes that Hamas presented a valuable gift for Putin's birthday. On the day of the attack on October 7th, the Russian president celebrated his 71st birthday. And the outbreak of war in the Middle East is surely a pleasant surprise for the sole ruler of the Kremlin, whose strategic priority is to divert the attention of the West from Ukraine, of course. Putin did not start this crisis, but he would happen to inflame it in any way possible to his advantage, in particular. And also the bloodthirsty Russian Tsar just enjoys the chaos in general. I would like to add the cherry on the top to the topic of chaos and destabilization. The other day, the Finnish media reported that the government and the defense forces of the country suspect Russia of attacking the Baltic Connector, that is a gas pipeline between Finland and Estonia. And this poses a threat to the national security of the country. The incident does not affect Finland's gas supply, and repair work is expected to last several months. Let's go back to Russia's selfish and flagrant motives in the war in the Middle East. Experts in the Institute of the Study of War analyzed numerous messages oozing from the under-Kremlin and emphasized, after Hamas attack, the Kremlin intensified several disinformation, of course, campaigns aimed at convincing Western voters that their leaders supported Ukraine at the cost of neglecting the conflict in the Middle East. Well, Radio Liberty reminds, in March last year, a Palestinian delegation arrived in Moscow for talks with Russian officials. This delegation was Hamas. At the meeting, they all talked how great it is to have, I quote, Russia's unchanging position to support a just solution to Palestinian problem. The Russians were back then and are these days active players on the Palestinian side. No doubts about that. What is happening there and why? Let us ask the question to someone who, I hope, knows better than us. Mark Babot, military expert, Lieutenant Colonel of the General Staff of the Israeli Defense Forces in reserve, is with us this night. Hello, Mark.
Good evening, even if it's not so politically correct to say today, good Absolutely. Evening.
My first question, why? Why did Hamas start this war, right now, without any provocation from Israel? I know the half of the answer, but why? What's the reason is that the consequences should and will be dire to them, or they are not afraid of it at all?
The question why and how it occurred that Israeli security system collapsed in all four levels, those questions will be answered only after the victory ending the war. Because we don't know really why now. All political circumstances were that they shouldn't attack. But sometimes when you are dealing with those creatures, you cannot even imagine yourself what they can do. And maybe one of the explanations is the fanatical radicalism of Sunni, very Hamas ideology,
right,
that said that is saying always that in the worst case, Allah will come and save them from Israel because Allah must help them. And because they have no idea of right of Jewish people or Israel as a country to survive, they can start this war every minute.
Okay, well, I mean, I would love to see how Allah would come and help Israelis. I would love to see their faces then. I hear that people speaking now and then in the corridors of power that could Israeli intelligence have really failed to see that Hamas was preparing an invasion. Do you think this is the case?
Yes, I think that Israel failed in all four levels: tactical, techno-tactical, operational, and strategic levels, even in political. And those questions will be investigation after the war. It will be a committee of government committee, exactly as it was after the Yom Kippur War in '73. So the answers will come sooner or later. But now we are in a full-size war. All our army is mobilized, and we have no other choice only to win, because on this part of land there is no place for Hamas and Israel together after the 7th of October. Because what they have done, it's you cannot explain it in logical human mind explanations. All was before, it's not relevant.
I understand you. Thank you so very much for your answer. My next question was, is it possible to consider the scenario that someone turned a blind eye inside the Israeli intelligence? But you already answered that everything will come after the victory of Israel and after the investigation of what really happened. But for now, Israel must win, and I'm absolutely sure Israel will win. So is there, my next question, is there a real solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? And in what perspective? Israel wins. What's next?
It's a very good question because the political situation after the war will be that there is no Hamas, no weapon, no armed people in Gaza. It's not only Hamas, it's some parts of ISIS and the Islamic Jihad and other terrorist organizations. Nowadays, Hamas, it's not only a terrorist organization, it's really part of the terrorist state, exactly like it was in the Assassin state in Lebanon in the Middle Ages. So after that, all armed persons in Gaza Strip will be disarmed. We will speak about, many solutions can be imagined, like full autonomy in Egypt, or international government, or back of Palestinian authority from Judea and Samaria, West Bank. So, in 2014, they killed almost 300 Palestinian Authority officials. Why then the world, democratic, so-called enlightened world didn't see it?
The genocide, right? Putin flirts with Hamas openly and supports for Palestinian helping, at least the rhetoric of this is that way. So Putin's position, is it really helping him? What is he doing? The global realignment against the West alongside countries like China and Iran. What is the plan? He probably understands what he is. So I'm asking you, what do you think? What Israel maybe is thinking, or what a military man thinks of what is Putin doing?
Let's start from the beginning. There is a war between Gaza terrorist state and Israel, full-scale war. And then the war was, I don't know if it was planned by Hezbollah and Iran, but it was, of course, informed and coordinated. So we know that Iran and the Islamic Guards of the revolution were informed by Hamas about the war, because Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, they fully founded by Iran. So if Iran knows, I am sure that Russian security organizations know also, because they are nowadays the best friends in the world and even military partners. So I don't know if we have signs of Russian, planning or intervention in this conflict, but of course Iran, yes. And even on informational level, it is clear that they knew about the war. It's clear nowadays to many. I think that after the war, Israeli intelligence organizations will bring the answers. Who knows, where knows, and why, and so on. So nowadays it's too far away from Israel.
Indeed,
but one thing we want to say, that this war brought us and Ukraine in the same condition against the acts of evil. Nowadays it's North Korea and Iran and Russia and Syria maybe, and all other states that support the brutal aggression of Russia against Ukraine.
After Israel wins, would a new Israel want to hold any relationships to the Kremlin that openly supported Hamas?
I hope that not. And even a lot of Jewish people in Russia will not stop us for, beginning new era or old era of Israeli-Russian relationships, right. Because the relationships are like Soviet Union. The signs of KGB and right. Signs of old Soviet politics against Israel are still existing in the Russian establishment.
Dear Mr. Babot, Mark, thank you so very much for your explanations and for your military and human expertise and for your time. It was a lovely conversation. Hope to have you soon, and stay safe, please. I wish victory, nothing else but victory to Israel.
So I wish. I'm speaking in many Ukrainian channels, so I really believe in the victory of Ukraine.
We are not Ukrainian television, but I have a lot of friends in Ukrainian state television.
It's the same side of the conflict.
Right, okay, thank you.
The light against the night.
Thank you so very much. Very nicely put, sir. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Watch this.
What actually is Gaza Strip? How are they living there? Or better said, surviving? The Gaza Strip on the border of Israel and Egypt has been living in economic isolation for almost 20 years. More than 2 million Palestinians live on this narrow strip of the Mediterranean coast. Not a good or even moderately bad place to live at. Of course, it's a nightmare. That poverty has been created and supported by Hamas, having practically no sources of income here, and people mostly live in poverty, of course, and Hamas, acting as the leadership of the Gaza Strip, provides jobs. As simple and effective as that. Founded in 1988, the movement proclaims two long-term goals: the destruction of the Jewish state and the creation of an Islamic state instead, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Hamas's immediate goal is liberation of Palestine and the return of the Palestinian people. The number of Hamas members is estimated to amount to 20-25,000 militants. There is no economy of its own on the territory of sector. Even fresh water and electricity are all supplied from Israel. According to open source reports, since the early 1990s, Hamas has been funded, armed, and trained by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and that is Iran. According to some estimates, today up to 70% of the financial needs of the Gaza Strip are financed by Iran. But Hamas used funding from Tehran not only to address humanitarian issues, no, but who could ever think? Also for military attacks on Israel in 2008, 2009, 2014 and 2021. The Wall Street Journal reveals how Iran helped prepare these brutal attacks on Israel. The attack was agreed upon at a meeting in Beirut on October 2nd. It was attended by officers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and representatives of 4 Iranian-backed militant groups, including Hamas, of course, which holds power in Gaza. And also Hezbollah, a Shiite militant group and political fraction of Lebanon. Israeli authorities said Iran is behind the attacks, albeit indirectly. Official Tehran says it is not involved in attacks in any way, and smiles.
Watch this.
We have our next guest on the line waiting for us to ask some provocative questions. Ilya Aizenstat, activist of the Israeli organization Friends of Ukraine, is with us tonight. Ilya, hello.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Is evening good? Where are you? How are you? What's going on? Are you in Israel right now?
Yes, right now I'm in Israel on the north part of the country, and thanks God that this evening is quite well and good in Israel. Less Syrians are heard around the country, and we only know about the preparation of the army that are ongoing right now all over the country on the northern and southern border in both. So all of our thoughts are now, as Ukrainians and Israelis are, with both armies, IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, and Ukrainian Armed Forces, and hoping then both of these armies will keep strong and safe during this tough time.
Ilya, what do you think? How far can this war go in Israel and in terms of international interventions? Because the world is obviously changing. This is what we are observing. I have no doubt that Israel has the strong army, but how far the sides will push?
I would say that I'm not the guy that would predict anything, but considering the ongoing situation with U.S. Navy and fleet that are coming very close with their largest ships to Israeli coast and Lebanon coast, including Gerald Ford and Eisenhower, which is now coming out of the Norfolk, I can judge and assume that probably these fleet is coming to protect Israel and say to other Israeli neighbors not to take part in this war, which was declared to be the war against Hamas. And the final reason is to clear up the Gaza out of Hamas and stop this terror organization till the very end. So I do believe that that could work, but I'm judging only from the point of the person that trying to be predictable and logical in all what I'm doing. Our enemy, both in Ukraine and Israel, are not going by any mean of logic. They're acting very, very brutal, and everything, what are they doing is not logical in any case. So basically, what I see now that the circles of history are going back and back.
Absolutely.
And now we're on the very edge of 1967 Six-Day War, and Israel exactly in the same position when he's supposed to defend itself so hard as Israel can, because this is not only about Israel. The same as in Ukraine is not about the Ukraine; it's about the whole world, because Middle East, Europe, it's all parts of the world where the biggest powers of the world, biggest economies are fighting for every piece of land, for every partner, for every country. And what I hear from the people that have some connection to local politics and have experience in army on the officers' roles, let's say, they say that the situation is very, very serious, and people have to be prepared for everything. In terms of everything, from my point of view, I see the full-scale war on a few fronts. It could include Lebanon and Hezbollah with their Shia Iranian proxy, Hezbollah. It could include Iran. It could be rebels from Yemen. So it could be anyone who is supported by Iran or Russia or both of them.
Why now?
We follow the...
Pardon me. I mean, this is so brazen. I mean, the consequences for terrorists could and should be very dire. It could be the end of it. Why now? Why all of them? They are so afraid, so not afraid. They are ready to be like, go impugn out of that.
It's very complicated to understand for those who are not grown in the atmosphere of this very special piece of land, which is called Gaza Strip. Because what I see around the media and what I see from different Telegram channels and what I've learned years and years ago, that from the very small age, every kid in Gaza is taught to be killed a Jew or an Israeli, and they do not recognize Israeli state. They call it a Zionist, blah, 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 and they do not even think that this is a legit state and people of Israel have right to live anywhere in the world. So all of the people grown in Gaza are ready to die for their ideas of this movement that is not very friendly to anyone except its members. And you know how Hamas was cruel in 2007 when they just expelled all of the representatives of Palestinian National Administration out of the Gaza Strip after they won elections. Actually, that was democratic elections, as they proclaim. But why it's happening right now? There could be a few reasons. First of all, it's negotiations before the deal with Saudi Arabia and Israel, which is part of the long-term policy of the state of Israel of becoming a good friend to all modern Arab countries that are developing countries with strong economy in order to confront the Iranian threat, which is felt not only by the state of Israel, but other Gulf state and other regional countries. So this is the first reason that is discussed in the media. The second option, if we follow the war tactics, right? One of the things which is done in the army, you're trying to bring leverage from the left side of the front line to the right side of the front line, if you're a talented general or a commander on the front line. And that's the kind of a trick which is used during the war. So let's think of a world as a big front line where we had this axe of evil connected and headed by probably Moscow and supported by Iran, by Northern Korean Republic, Democratic People's Republic. Let's think about this in the terms that this is a general front line, and the axe of evil is trying to move the leverage from now. We had the Ukraine. Now we saw the conflict in Armenia and Azerbaijan after the negotiations between Putin and Turkish president. Now we have the situation on the Middle East. And what is next? We've seen a couple of days ago reports from the general staff of South Korean army regarding the threat from Northern Korea, that they're preparing to attack South Korea. So let's think of it that this is the way of the world's evils to fight the democracy, to fight the free world, and somehow to spread its influence around the world, to create a chaos, to earn some money for their another war, for their next war. Because what we've seen after the Saturday's attack, that the prices for oil are getting higher, and we know who's one of the biggest beneficiaries of this price rising. So in general, it could sound like a conspiracy, but still it goes in some very exact pattern, which is would have been seen for years when the Soviet Union used its proxies to influence different regimes in South America, in Africa, and the Middle East. So basically nothing new for the world's policies.
Exactly. You're reading my thoughts. You actually answered two of my questions. How do you see the end of those bloody events, and who benefits from the destabilization in the Middle East? Well, everyone plans to benefit out of it, but I don't really think that anyone, any expert or anyone involved or even not involved can even predict anything in this mayhem. Am I right?
That's definitely you 100% right, because the Middle East is a very complicated part of the world where the local mentality is completely different and completely out of understanding for, like, let's say European people or Northern American people, because it's a very special mix of different cultures, ideas, thoughts, and everything. What I believe, and what is my deepest hope, that we know that the general sponsor of the terrorism in the Middle East is Iran and its proxies around Syria, Lebanon, Gaza Strip, and other countries. And I've seen a numbers of videos from Iran where local people, young people, are not supporting what regime is trying to force them to do. For example, I saw a video around Telegram, it was circulated, when there is a Israeli and American flag on the street, and all of the young people going down by the street, they're not going on these flags. They're just walking around, and they're showing their respect to these countries which are opposite to their Ayatollah regime, right? And then I've seen right after the operation in Gaza started, this war started, I've seen the video from the stadium in Tehran when somebody from local authorities brought Palestinian flags on the stadium, and they tried to spread it around the people, around the crowd. And what the crowd said, we don't need these flags, and they're against this, because Iranian people have a very good memory, and they know very well how before 1979 Israel and Iran were quite a good friends, and Israel supported a lot at that times the Iranian people. And what is more important, a couple of months ago, Riza Pahlavi came to Israel with a historical visit for the first time.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
I could recognize it as a as an attempt to change the Middle East, the thing which was declared by a number of Israeli officials to change the Middle East after this war. So probably we will see maybe an uprising or anything which is very close to the uprising in Iran, because we have not to forget that people there are still fighting for their freedom and democracy, and people are getting, women are getting beat up all the time because of they're not wearing hijab or not following the rule. Yeah. So basically, that's the only thing that I would hope for to change the Middle East right now.
Count me in. But the attack on Israel against the background of the protracted war in Ukraine demonstrates that the world security system needs reforms and changes right here and now. How should the West act? Okay, I'm going to restate my question. If that would be for you to decide, if you would be that powerful in the West, what would be your decision? How would you reform the security system so it wouldn't contain Russia in United Nations Security Council, for God's sake, at least?
I would take as an example the relations between the United States of America and Israel, because when the war in Israel started last Saturday, what happens next? The U.S. Navy is coming right next hours after the attack have started. And Joe Biden said that we will support the state of Israel. And that's the way how I believe every country should build its security, finding a strong friend and building a coalition that both will benefit from it. Because we don't have to think that United States are like a big brother that is always behind the Israel. It is so, but still we have to remember that Israel produces unique weapons, unique technologies that are then used in the United States and by U.S. military. And this is what all the time I'm trying to write in my blog or any post, that Ukraine have a unique potential among its scientists and factories and military factories especially. We have a lot of really interesting things that have been developed for a couple of last years. Yes. And this is what we can propose to the West and say, we will produce, I don't know, radars, anti-aircraft system. We have scientists. We have beautiful universities back in Ukraine, polytechnical universities all over the country with a beautiful knowledge base.
Oh, I know that very well. I know that very well because I've been Jewish myself. I have part of my family and friends and relatives living in Israel. So I know that very well. So I'm going to ask you a question, the last question of our conversation for today, that I'm asking myself just as well from time to time. If ever Palestine will come over to Israel and said, let's start something new, do you think this is ever can end up with some sort of a negotiation, some sort of a peace, something that can be built up, because you said that just countries need to benefit from each other? Maybe when Hamas will be defeated, maybe there will be a different Palestine, but the memory remains, and the scars remains, and the hatred remains. Do you think this is even a way to think, and maybe in 10, 50, 20 years, 100 years maybe? Is that even possible?
I would say the next thing. Couple of weeks ago, I was in Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, and we were discussing the issues of Ukraine, connected to Ukraine. And right after, we walked through the corridors of Knesset, and we've seen the pictures from the first historical visit of German Chancellor to Israel. That was probably, if I'm not missing, in 1952. So it was 7 years after the end of the World War II. And this visit to Israel and establishing relation and ties between Germany and Israel, the Jewish state, was confronted by a lot of Israelis, a lot of those who have relatives or families died or killed in the Holocaust. However, Germany have built to Israel a couple of submarines. They have a very strong military ties for now. And history of both of our countries shows that everything can happen. We know that for decades we had a peace negotiation, a peace deals with the Palestinians, with Arafat, with everyone. We discussed with all of the Arab leaders the future of this land. And the only peace we have with Egypt and Jordan, which keeps the safest border for decades. So we have now peace with other Arab countries, and we see that it is possible. But the time have to pass, and the generation should change.
Right.
Because the pain of especially, I would like to highlight the numbers.
Please do.
For 80 years of wars of Israel, 20,000 Israelis have died in the wars and in terror attacks. 20,000. And then in one day, 1,300 people were brutally murdered, killed in their beds, in their homes, apartment. And what we've seen now, this is actually for the first time in the Israeli history, they allowed to show these horrible pictures of what have found on the places of these mass murders. And this is something very, very unique to Israel, because this the victims and their remains are very well protected from the media, not to show and not to bother this very, very harmful thing to their relatives, and not to show the parts of the body, not to make it even more painful for relatives. But for now, for year 2023, we have this date, the Saturday, with 1,300 people already declared dead. And we have up to 150 hostages in Gaza Strip. And we don't know their fate, what will happen to them. So regarding your question, it will take time, but everything is possible in the world if people will think how to live and prosper and not how to build weapons and to kill.
Thank you very much for your answer. Last question. I just can't not asking it. I hear voices that say, oh my God, Israel is at panic. Nothing is happening there. It's a mayhem. Their shops are closed. People are running across the street back and forth. There's no food. There's no medicine. Everything is down. Everything is shut and nothing. There's no more Israel almost. Is that true? Is that panic? Is Israeli are in panic?
This is not, I believe that this is not about the panic. This is about the decisions that are taken by the government and the taken by local citizens, because the home front authorities called to people and sent the messages that you have to bring 72 hours for food and packages, water for 72 hours. With no this, so after this message, for sure, people came to stores and bought a lot of products. But however, most of what have been sold in the stores that was sold for volunteers that are now going to every base all over the country and just bringing the soldiers sweets, energy drinks, cigarettes, coffee, t-shirt, everything what they need, even what they don't really need. Because I've seen the messages from my friends who are now moving somewhere around the country with these trucks with food. They met the military men and they said, we don't need, we have everything. We have like dozens of pizza on our military base. We have everything. So basically, people of Israel are very prepared. And for sure, there was no such an accident, a terror attack for years. And the situation now today is equal, according to a lot of political analysts, to 1973, the Yom Kippur War. But still, the people are ready. People know what to do, how to act. Bomb shelters generally opened, and there's a water, hot water, cold water. There are some refrigerators. It depends on the neighbors, how they prepared. So basically, people are just preparing, and they know how to act. So actually, this is the right way of every citizen in the country that is occurred in such situation.
Absolutely.
To know what to do exactly at the moment. Like if you have the home front siren or alarm, you have to know what to do right now.
Ilya, thank you so very much for being online with us. Thank you for being in Israel and for doing the same as Ukraine does for the world. I wish you nothing but victory. Please stay safe, and I hope to hear you soon with us.
Thank you very much for invitation, and God bless Ukraine and Israel, and may both of our people will be safe and happy to celebrate both our victories.
God bless. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Watch this.
What could be the resume for today's Talk for More? The length of the border between Gaza and Israel is less than 37 miles. However, the shock wave this warfare collision will produce will not only get to Israel and the Palestinians of Gaza, but will echo worldwide, no doubt about that. It will strike Ukraine, it will strike Saudi Arabia, the same most likely Iran just as well. Thinks American journalist, three-time Pulitzer Prize winner Thomas Friedman explains himself. A prolonged war, here I want to emphasize the word prolonged, between Israel and Hamas could lead to transfer to Tel Aviv American military equipment needed by Kiev and would make impossible, for now at least, the proposed Saudi-Israeli agreement on the normalization of relations. And if it turns out that Iran incited Hamas to attack to disrupt the Israeli-Saudi deal, it could lead to increased tensions between Israel and Iran and Tehran's Lebanese puppet Hezbollah, as well as between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is an incredibly dangerous moment on several fronts, on all of them, if you ask me.
Watch this.
Well, that seems to be it for tonight, folks. It was my show, Talk for More. My name is Henry Keane. Please stay safe and tune for more. Find us in the internet. Comment, like, and subscribe. We'll see you soon. Stay safe.